363 of the Biden administration. On this Martin Luther King Jr. holiday, the Senate is on the eve of a showdown over voting rights. Democrats are planning an all-out effort to push the legislation through Congress. Tomorrow, Majority Leader Chuck Schumer is expected to begin debating two bills already passed by the House, the Freedom to Vote Act and the John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act. Schumer is moving ahead despite almost certain defeat amid Republican opposition. And while Democratic Senators Manchin and Sinema support the bills, neither of them back a change to the filibuster to make those bills law. This morning in Washington, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s family led a march for voting rights. Afterward, Dr. King's eldest son called on the Senate and the White House to act.
Our democracy stands on the brink of serious trouble. History will be watching what happens tomorrow. Black and brown Americans will be watching what happens tomorrow. In 50 years, students will read about what happens tomorrow and know whether our leaders had the integrity to do the right thing.
Earlier today, President Biden also renewed his call for senators to pass voting rights legislation.
It's no longer just about who gets to vote. It's about who gets to count the vote, whether your vote counts at all. It's about two insidious things: voter suppression and election subversion. It's time for every elected official in America to make it clear where they stand. It's time for every American to stand up, speak out, be heard. Where do you stand? Whose side are you on?
The White House has indicated that Joe Biden isn't ready to give up if the voting bills don't make it out of the Senate. Earlier this evening, one Democratic member of Congress indicated what Joe Biden may do next.
He will sit down with the leadership and the senators who voted against this to see what can we protect. Can we at least make sure that people can't be kicked off the rolls? Can we at least make sure everyone has ballot boxes and access to that?
The New York Times reports that the failure of federal voting legislation means that Democrats will need to focus much of their time and money on voter registration and mobilization during this midterm election year. Meanwhile, over in the House, all eyes are on the January 6th committee's efforts to hear from witnesses who members say are crucial to the investigation. The Washington Post reports the panel is divided over whether to pursue subpoenas targeting former Vice President Mike Pence, House Republican leader Kevin McCarthy, and Congressman Jim Jordan and Scott Perry. According to the Washington Post, quote, some members of the committee, including the Vice Chair Liz Cheney, have signaled an aggressive posture, while others, including the chairman, Benny G. Thompson, have sounded notes of skepticism that such subpoenas could be enforced, end quote. Also tonight, we're following the latest on an act of terror that took place over the weekend, targeting a synagogue in suburban Fort Worth, Texas. On Saturday, a gunman took the rabbi and others hostage at a congregation, Beth Israel, during live-stream services. The FBI says the gunman was a British national named Malik Akram. The captives were held for some 10 hours during a tense standoff with law enforcement that ended when the hostages escaped. A senior law enforcement official told NBC News the gunman was shot and killed by authorities. Earlier today, some captive described their ordeal.
It was during prayer, while we were praying, and my back was turned, I heard a click. And it could have been anything, and it turned out that it was his gun. The last hour or so of the standoff, he wasn't getting what he wanted. He was getting, it didn't look good. It didn't sound good. We were terrified. And when I saw an opportunity where he wasn't in a good position, I made sure that the two gentlemen who were still with me, that they were ready to go. The exit wasn't too far away. I told them to go. I threw a chair at the gunman, and I headed for the door. And all three of us were able to get out without even a shot being fired.
He said, why he chose this synagogue because Jews control the world, Jews control the media, Jews control the banks. I want to talk to the chief rabbi of the United States. He came to us, he terrorized us because he believed these tropes, these anti-Semitic tropes He even said at one point that I'm coming to you because I know President Biden will do things for the Jews. I know President Trump will do things for the Jews.
The FBI on Sunday issued a statement that read, quote, "This is a terrorism-related matter in which the Jewish community was targeted and is being investigated by the Joint Terrorism Task Force." Now, that statement follows remarks Saturday from the special agent in charge of the FBI's Dallas office that the gunman's actions were, quote, "not specifically related to the Jewish community." During the standoff, the gunman demanded the release of a federal prisoner now being held in North Texas after being convicted in 2010 of attempting to kill American soldiers in Afghanistan. Well, with that, let's bring in our leadoff guests on this Monday night. Alexei McCammon, political reporter for ACCUSES. Jonathan Greenblatt, CEO and National Director of the Anti-Defamation League. His new book is titled "It Could Happen Here: Why America is Tipping from Hate to the Unthinkable and How We Can Stop It." Also joining us, former United States Attorney Joyce Vance, who spent 25 years as a federal prosecutor. She's a co-host of the podcast Sisters-in-Law. Welcome to all three of you. Thank you for being with us. Alexei, let me start with you. Let's talk about what